All right, welcome to week 7 here. This is our second look at loops here. This is a course, it's an intro to Java course is what this is. It says for business majors, but it's just an intro to Java course for people who have never programmed before. So it's a good course for that. Uh, we're going to go be looking at loops today. We did for loops last week. This week we're going to be looking at while loops and do while loops, which are a little different. Uh, Same concept, though, they all still work on the idea of a Boolean. Remember, the whole idea is a condition. And the condition is always a Boolean. So if you say, is 4 greater than 10, then that's false. So it wouldn't work. If is 4 greater than 2, that's true. So it's always a Boolean is what this condition comes out to be. So Java provides, now this is a statement. This, when it says Java provides 3 different looping structures, this means Java as its just pure framework. There are plenty of libraries that have come out since then with plenty of other options out there. But at the base level, you've got the 3 different looping structures. We did the for. Now we're going to do the while loop, where the while loop works like this. You say while condition. Now this condition could be what I just said, is 4 greater than 10. Then the statements. And the statements should reside inside brackets. I think even if you only have one statement, I think it's a good programming habit to just put them in a bracket. Okay. While the condition is true, statement executes. While the condition loop is a pretest loop, that means it'll test the value of the condition prior to executing. So that means here, we come down here, say, is the condition true? If it's true, we run the statements. If it's false, we don't do anything. So if the condition's false, you'll never see the statement. If it's true, you'll see it. Okay. You can get yourself into an infinite loop with this. So that's one thing to worry about. An infinite loop, which we watch here, we start with an x and we make it 20. And then we say while x is greater than 0, print out x is greater than 0. Well, the problem is this is never going to stop because at no point are you decrementing 20. So you have to add something to it. You could add an x minus minus. You could add x equals x minus 5 if you want to do more than just, than just the xx. But remember, the x minus minus will take off 1 each time. So every time this runs, if I put that x, if I did this and I put the x minus minus, every time this loop ran, so first time through it'll be 20, second time it'll come out be 19, 18, until it finally gets to 0, okay? But if you didn't have that in there, like the statement they have here, this thing's never going to run, never going to stop running. This version of the loop decrements each time they're in ice. So we just said, that's what I just showed you. We're decrementing, okay? Block statements. Now, the curly braces are required to enclose block statements. If you did not put curly braces here, if I got rid of these curly braces, this while loop is going to go infinite again because it's only going to fire off this statement. It stops at the first semicolon. That's why I say even if you have one line, just good habit to put your curly braces in there because it prevents that from happening. So, but again, if you have more than one condition, you can put them all. They all have to sit inside the curly braces. The indentation in Java is not important. The indentation is I would advise you doing it because it makes it much easier to read later when you're looking at your code, but you don't need it. Like in other languages like Python, you don't even use the brackets, you just use indentation. But in this one, you could actually write this all on one line and it would run. Okay. But it's just not advisable because it's just so hard to read. Okay. So input validation is the process for ensuring the user's input's valid. So we're going to sit there and we're going to say enter a number, range 1 through 100. And we already instantiated our keyboard using our scanner up here. Remember, scanner keyboard equals new scanner key system in, which system in by itself is your keyboard. So to validate, so we're going to ask for a number, an integer, and you're going to give a number. And this says while the number is less than 1, or remember the 2 pipes, this is or. Those are or. Remember, this is and. You have to have 2 of them. That's and for our logical. Or the number is greater than 100. It'll say this number is invalid. And then it says try it again, enter another number, and you keep iterating until you enter a number that works. So you see we have a scanner out here. The first instance we ask is outside the loop because it's a pretest loop, so we have to give it a number to even start it. It's going to check the number, and if I give it a number of 0, or if I give it a number of -2, or if I give it a number of 300, it's going to say, whoa, this is not within the range. Now remember, an OR, only one of these has to be true to be true. So if it's under 0, if this was an and I gave you 0, it would be false. Because once one is false, they're both false. Both or, as long as one is true. So if this is 0, this is going to be true. This is going to be true. So it doesn't matter that this is false. It's still, the whole statement will be true. It's just going to print out, and this will keep running until you give it a number that is greater than 1 and less than 100. Okay, so range between 1 and 100. So you can't even do 1 or 100 because it wouldn't work. So, you know. Actually, no, it would work. Okay, never mind. I'm wrong. Yeah, that would work. You don't need the equal to. Okay. All right, so the next one we look at is the do while loop. So the do while is a little different. The do while, you notice the conditions down here. So we start with do, we have the brackets and our statements up here, and then we have the while condition down here. This works differently because this one will actually, the first time through, will always run. If you give it a good number, it will never run the loop. If you come in here and I put down 50, this loop will never run. The do while, no matter what I do, the first time through, it's going to run. So do while loop flow charts like this. We run the statements, then we ask a question. If the question's true, we run the statements again, and we keep doing that until the statement's false and we quit. So loops that keep the program running, totals while evaluating data. Imagine needing to keep running totals for user input. So let's take a look at, let's pop over to our program, and I will pull up, what was the total sales was the name of the code. So let's see if I can get this up for you. All right. Try to make it a little bigger. All right. So we got, our public class. So here we are in our main, because that's all we care about now. We got an int for days, double sales, double total sales, and a string input. So we're using the J option. If you guys remember, this is that dialog box that comes up, and the dialog box always, always, always is a string. So that's why string has to be input. Everything, no matter what you put in there, number, true, false, it's going to be a string. So then we have to use this integer to parse the int from this input. Okay. So the total sales is 0, 0. And I say for int count 1, count us days. Let's see, hold on. Hold on, let me see. I think that does not look like, yeah, it's total sales. Why would it, okay, it's a for loop. All right, so anyway, so we're saying for count equals 1, count is, it's count, as long as count is less than days, it's going to keep going. So for how many days do you have sales figure? So I input a day. So I put 10. This is going to run until the count equals 10. It's going to run 10 times. So, and then each one, it's going to input and pop up a new thing for me to enter the sales number for that day. And it's going to pulls that, and then it adds it to the number of sales here. Remember this is a shortcut. You see a plus equals, that's the same thing as me saying equals total sales plus total sales. Okay, that's the same thing. It's just a shortcut. The plus equals does that. You can do a minus equals too, and a times equals, that whole thing. But that's what this loop is that you're going to tell it how many days you want, and it's going to keep running a total there for you. But why I chose this as an option, because that's actually a for loop, I don't know, but good refresher for for loop. We'll call it. Hold on, let me get over here, get our thing up. All right, so the logic for calculating our running time. So we set accumulator to 0. Is there another number to read? That's our Boolean, because it said, hey, how many days do we have? And is there another number? We say yes, read the next number, add the number to the accumulator, and keep going until we exceed the numbers. If I put in 10 days, once I get to 11, that's false. It's going to go out the door. Okay. So I go into Sentinel value. Sometimes the endpoint of input data is not known. A Sentinel value can be used to notify the program to stop. This is called, like on files, it's an end of file indicator. So that's when there's certain, like Excel, there's libraries for loading Excel into Java, and it knows when your file's done because it gets an end point indicator in there. If it's user input, the user can be prompted to put in something to execute it. You can and say, hey, give me a -1, and I know we're not done, because you can't have -1 days. And that gets the files typically, end of file marker lets you know the file is done, so you can quit reading it. So an example here, we're using the scanner input, enter the number of points. If you know what these X's and stuff are, these are just being put in by NetBeans. If you weren't using NetBeans, you wouldn't see that. It's coding there, putting it in there. So we're saying, hey, enter number of points your team has earned each game this season, enter -1 when you're done. So you enter points. So if I enter 20, well, it's not. So this bang equal sign means not equal to. So if I say points not equal to -1, so if I give anything but a -1, it's going to be true, and it's going to go through. It's going to say total points plus points. Again, this is that shortcut. Then system print out, enter points again, or end. So as long as you keep entering numbers, it's going to keep adding the points up until you hit -1, and that'll end the loop. Okay, so that's the Sentinel value. Because we don't know when to stop, so we have to put a forced stop in there. Deciding which loops to use. Okay, so keep in mind the while and the for are both pre-test loops, while the do while is post-test. That means the first time it goes through, it's going to execute every single time. And you can use this when you don't want the statements to execute for condition being false at the beginning. Do while loop, post-test loop, use it when you want statements to execute at least one time. And the for loop, use it when there's some type of counting variable that can be evaluated. Not necessarily, but that's you can use for loops for other things too. But it's a good kind of rule of thumb, and that's probably what is on the test. File input and output. Re-entering data all the time gets tedious. So data can be saved to a file, input, output. Files have to be opened. Data is written to the file. The file must be closed prior to program termination. In general, there are two types of files, binary and text. So we can write to a file and we can read from a file. And we're just going to go and look at the code. So writing to a file is pretty simple. We use this thing called a print writer class. It's just like bringing it in, it's instantiating your scanner. So we're going to say output file equals new print writer, and then that's the name of the file. Okay. So print writer class allows you to write data using print or print line methods as you've been using to display the data. So just system out object, the print line method of print writer class will place a new line. So the print method writes the data without writing a new line character. Remember that. That's the line versus print. So you create a print writer class, names, and then I use the name output file. And this is an object. We instantiate an object, print line Chris, print line Chris, print line Gene, and then we say close. So the file is going to have 1, 2, 3 names. That's all going to come out of the file. Okay. Use print writer class, put the following import statement at the top, import Java IO. IO typically in programming stands for input output, and that's star. Star means it's going to bring in all the parts of that library. Okay. Exceptions. When something unexpected happens in Java, the program throws what's called an exception, or an error code's another word for it. This method that is executing when the exception is thrown must either handle the exception or pass it up the line. Handling exceptions will be discussed later. To pass up a line, the method needs a throws clause in the method header. Okay. Insert a throws clause in a method header. Simply write the word throws in the name. So print writer objects can throw an IO exception. So you write throws clause. Throws IO exception like this. So we add this to our main method here. Okay. Throws IO. I don't know why they're covering this before we start covering methods, but you can add that to the main method and it'll throw an exception there. Selecting a file location contains backslash characters. Remember, if the backslash is used in a string as an escape character, so you actually have to use 2 of them. You're putting 2 backslashes basically for 1. So if you wanted 3 backslashes, you'd actually have to put 4. And we're print writer to, and I love this, the A drive. If anyone wants to know a little piece of history, the A drive was the name for the floppy, because that was when the old computers, before Windows and everything, had DOS, and to start the computer, you would have to put a floppy disk in, and that's what would load the operating system. And then normally, most computers, you would get 2, so you could have your operating system in one and your program in the other, or a blank disk, so that would be B. So when the hard drives came along, that's when they got called C. And you only had 2 hard drives, C and D, and then E normally became your CD-ROM. But So A was just almost, that's harkens back to my days in the youth and when that was a floppy drive. Okay, reading data from a file, we can use a scanner. Okay, so we have file, my file, new file, custom, and then we just, so that's the file we want. It's customer's text, and we use a scanner input file into the new scanner file. So keyboard scanner, new scanner, system in, enter the name of the file, string of the file names right there, next line. File equals new file name, and then scanner input the file. The lines above create the instance scanner, prompt used for file name, get the file name from the user, create an instance of the file class to represent the file, and an instance of scanner that reads from the file. Once the instance of scanner is created, data can be read using the same methods that you used. So from file name text scanner input equals new scanner file. So read line, next line, and then input file line close. Again, the IO exception, I don't know if these slides are out of order or they're just, okay, no, they're not, but okay. So the input output exception when a file object is passed to a constructor. And again, so constructor, they haven't used the term for it. This is the constructor. Anytime you're instantiating, so this scanner keyboard is a constructor. String file name, scanner, file.file, this is a constructor. So that can throw an exception. So you want to make sure you put the throws IO exceptions clause, the header, and any methods that instantiates the scanner class. Okay. And detecting into file, scanner class has next method will return true if another item can be read from a file. So you got a file with like 30 lines, and we put in a while loop. So we instantiate a new file, has input file, and we say input has next. And while that is true, you're going to keep reading the next line. Reading the next line. Finally, once you're done, you'll just close this out, closing the file when you're done. All right. So here's introduction to while and do while loops, a little quick refresher on for loops, and some just random information on reading files and stuff into this. Again, this is just a lot of information being thrown at you. For your patience and keep working. We'll get this class